Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, as my colleague from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lake said, here we go again, debating yet another breach of privilege by this Liberal government. The Liberals' continued refusal to comply with parliamentary orders shows their complete lack of respect for this institution and parliamentarians. As frustrating as this is, it is not surprising. After all, on July 25, 1969, during the debate of a motion to adjourn the House, it was reported that Pierre Elliott Trudeau made the following statement regarding the opposition. When they get home, when they get out of Parliament, when they are 50 yards from Parliament Hill, they are no longer honourable members. They are just nobodies, Mr. Speaker. Well, I can confirm for you today that the apple hasn't fallen far from the tree. Right from the beginning with Elbowgate and motion number 6, which would have given the Liberals new powers to control the business of the House, and was described by the member for New Westminster Burnaby as both fundamentally anti-democratic and a sign of the greater disrespect that we've seen developing now for the last few weeks, and a completely undemocratic move to take away the tools we, opposition members, have to express our differences by the member for Regina Capel, or their attempt to exploit the pandemic by introducing legislation that would have allowed the Liberals to carry on for almost 2 years with no parliamentary oversight. This Prime Minister's disregard for parliamentarians in opposition and the rules that govern this place is obvious. According to Standing Order 108(1)A, parliamentary committees hold special powers to summon people and order the production of documents. It states, and I quote, "Standing committees shall be severally empowered to examine and inquire into all such matters as may be referred to them by the House, to report from time to time, and except when the House otherwise orders, to send for persons, papers, and records, to sit while the House is sitting, to sit during periods when the House stands adjourned, to sit jointly with other standing committees, to print from day to day such papers and evidence as may be ordered by them, and to delegate to subcommittees all or any of their powers except the power to report directly to the House." These powers are essential as they allow parliamentary committees to conduct important work. These powers are fundamental to the proper functioning of Parliament. When the government obstructs the work of committees by unlawfully refusing to provide documents or providing them heavily redacted, they are not only insulting Parliament, but Canadians who have sent representatives to this place to be their voice and hold the government accountable. This Liberal government has a pattern of trying to obstruct the work of Parliament and its committees by refusing to hand over documents, and they are regularly supported by the NDP in this regard. In fact, during our study at the Government Operations and Estimates Committee of the government contracts with McKinsey, Conservatives called for unredacted documents from government departments related to those contracts. Nearly every department either sent heavily redacted documents or no documents at all. And this included the Department of National Defence, the Department of Natural Resources, Export Development Canada, the Atomic Energy of Canada Limited, the Canada Development Investment Corporation, the Department of Employment and Social Development, the Department of Finance, the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Business Development Bank of Canada, the Canada Border Services Agency, the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board, the Canada Post Corporation, the Department of Citizenship and Immigration, and it was all led by the Prime Minister's own department, the Privy Council Office. 13 government departments, Mr. Speaker, agencies and Crown corporations refused to comply with a motion passed at a parliamentary committee. These departments, led by the Privy Council Office, denied the supremacy of Parliament, stating that they were able to decide what documents Parliament was entitled to have. granting themselves far-reaching, unconstitutional powers. When we tried to escalate the issue to the House to force departments to provide the unredacted documents, the Liberals filibustered, claiming that there was nothing to see here and that we were wasting our time. They convinced the NDP, their staunchest supporters in this place, to yet again bail them out and shut down our document request, hiding vital information about these contracts from Canadians. This, despite the fact the law clerk was brought to committee to provide the legal basis for parliamentary powers and provided the following testimony, and again I quote, "As the Grand Inquisitor of the nation, the House of Commons has the right to institute and conduct inquiries, as well as to send for papers and records. These rights are part of the House of Commons privileges, immunities, and powers, oftentimes referred to as parliamentary privilege, that are constitutional in nature, as they are rooted in Section 18 of the Constitution Act 1867, as well as in its preamble. These rights, including the constitutional nature of parliamentary privilege and the fundamental role of the House of Commons and its committees, have been recognized by the Supreme Court of Canada. There is no limit to the right of the House of Commons and of its committees to order the production of documents, providing that the documents are available in paper or electronic format and are in Canada. This power is subject only to the exceptions and limits explicitly stipulated by Parliament, the House of Commons, or its committees." In a later intervention, he reiterated the following: "You asked me to explain and clarify the right of the House and its committees to send for papers and records. This right to send for papers and records is one of the parliamentary privileges that the House of Commons and its committees have. This power is constitutional in nature, and it is subject only to the limitation that Parliament, the House, or the committees will impose on themselves." When requesting documents, sometimes a committee may be faced with a confidentiality claim. In such circumstances, the committee may decide to put measures in place to protect sensitive information. It may decide to no longer insist on its production order, or it may decide to insist on its production order and insist on the production of documents unredacted. Ultimately, it's for the committee to decide what option it wants to choose. Mr. Speaker, despite our protests and the rules that supported our request, Conservatives were outvoted by the NDP Liberal coalition. And our study of McKinsey was stalled, with the NDP once again covering for the scandal-ridden Liberal government. However, their victory was short-lived, with the Auditor General tabling her report earlier this year, which found that contracts should have never been awarded to McKinsey in the first place. The Liberals had, yet again, inappropriately given a sweetheart deal to a company being run by a close friend of the Prime Minister. This may have come to light earlier if the NDP had not helped the Liberals with obstructing the work of our committee. Instead, even to this day, we still not have received these documents. By allowing the bureaucrats to defy our order, the Liberals were successful in denying our committee access to the documents and keeping us, and indeed all Canadians, from seeing what they were trying to hide. In the case of Sustainable Development Technology Canada, or SDTC, the facts are even more startling. Hundreds of millions of dollars were given to Liberal insiders by hand-picked board members who had conflicts of interest related to the companies being given taxpayer dollars. The Auditor General found 186 cases of conflict of interest by board members. These board members were allowed to vote to give taxpayers' dollars to companies they had an interest in. 186 times, Mr. Speaker, and this government did nothing. They didn't ask any questions. They didn't check up on who was sending money where. They just allowed the board to give money to anyone they wanted to. And it turned out they were sending money to companies that they themselves were involved with. These 186 instances of conflict of interest involved $334 million. Even more concerning, the Auditor General didn't get through all the cases. This means that there could be hundreds of millions of dollars more that have been given to companies that these Liberal insiders have an interest in. Canadians deserve answers, and parliamentarians need to see what other egregious corruption is hidden in these documents. For now, we know that $334 million were spent without any oversight, without any accountability, and now it's gone, and Canadians are left footing the bill. Can we expect this Liberal government to get the money back, or that the wrongdoers will be held accountable? Probably not. They'll continue to sweep this under the rug, chalk it up to the cost of governing, and move on, much like they did with a ride scam, which they still have not recovered any money from. In fact, it's no wonder we'll see no accountability from these scamster board members, given a current minister used to work for one of the most prolific of them. The current Minister for the Environment worked for Cycle Capital, a company which benefited greatly from the SDTC grants. He was, in fact, their lobbyist. While working as their lobbyist, he managed to secure them $111 million in grants before he was elected. And guess what? He still holds shares in this company to this day, as was pointed out by my colleague from South Shore St. Margaret's. This practice of funneling hundreds of millions of dollars to companies which Liberal insiders have a vested interest in is a deeply disturbing pattern with this government. It is actually corrupt. We saw it with McKinsey, with over $100 million in contracts being inappropriately awarded, while a close friend of the Prime Minister, Dominic Barton, was the chairman. We see it with Rio Tinto, being given $222 million just 5 months after the same Dominic Barton was appointed as their chairman. We saw it with the ride scam, with tens of millions of dollars going to middlemen who did no actual work. We saw it with the $237 million contract given to the company of a former Liberal MP, Frank Bayliss, for ventilators, which were later sold for scrap metal. And we see it with the purchase of the $9 million luxury condo on Billionaires Row, purchased for the Prime Minister's media buddy, Tom Clark, in New York City. Time and time again, Liberal insiders get rich at the expense of Canadians and are shielded from any accountability by Liberal members of Parliament and their NDP coalition. While the Liberals have been creative in finding ways to abuse taxpayers' dollars to ensure they find their way into the pockets of their friends, they've also shown themselves to be uniquely corrupt and untrustworthy. When this government and their bureaucrats hide these documents by refusing to provide them or by heavily redacting them, they not only insult this House and infringe on the privilege of its members, but they also place themselves above the Constitution and the very foundation of our parliamentary system. And while it has become commonplace under this Liberal government, with new scandals coming to light week after week, Canadians need reassurance. They need to be reassured that this corruption is not normal. This is not the way government is meant to work. Government is meant to work for the people, for Canadians. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, this will not be how things are run when Conservatives form the next government. That is actually why Conservatives have brought forward this motion, a motion that calls upon the House to order the government, Sustainable Development Technology Canada, and the Auditor General of Canada each to deposit with the law clerk and Parliamentary Council within 14 days of the adoption of this order the following documents created or dated since January 1st, 2017, which are in its or her possession, custody, or control. And it intentionally includes all files, documents, briefing notes, memoranda, emails, or any other correspondence exchanged among government officials regarding SDTC. It includes contribution and funding agreements to which SDTC is a party, records detailing financial information of companies in which past or present directors or officers of SDTC had ownership, management, or other financial interests. It includes SDTC conflict of interest declarations, minutes of SDTC's board of directors and project review committees, and all briefing notes, memoranda, emails, or any other correspondence exchanged between SDTC directors and SDTC management, provided that the law clerk and Parliamentary Council shall promptly thereafter notify the Speaker whether each entity produced documents as ordered, and the Speaker in turn shall forthwith inform the House of the notice of the law clerk and Parliamentary Council. But if the House stands adjourned, the Speaker shall lay the notice upon the table pursuant to Standing Order 32.1. And finally, Mr. Speaker, the law clerk and Parliamentary Council shall provide forthwith any documents received by him pursuant to this order to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police for its independent determination of whether to investigate potential offences under the Criminal Code or any other Act of Parliament. Canadians deserve a government that respects Parliament and its fundamental role and powers. They deserve a government that will be transparent and accountable. They deserve opposition members to do their duty in holding the government to account. They deserve a government that will respect taxpayers' dollars. Mr. Speaker, Canadians deserve an end to this corruption, and it is time for a change, and Conservatives are ready to provide the kind of leadership and government that Canadians deserve. Thank you.